Rhythm. It's a word we all know and understand, and yet the subtleties and complexities of rhythm are seemingly endless. From the most basic or well-known programmed one-bar drum patterns to the endlessly developing variations thrown up by live drummers playing extended jazz sets, rhythms, and their implied grooves, never cease to get our feet tapping and pull us under their spells. Before we start to think about rhythm in a musical context, let's first acknowledge that the reason why musical rhythms feel so fundamental is because rhythm surrounds us. From before we're born, in fact, as our mother's heartbeats and our own become the first rhythms we encounter, with patterns so natural and essential that they are the life force behind our very existence. And then we're born into a world with rhythms and patterns everywhere. The sun rises and sets each day. We get hungry, so we eat. We get tired, so we sleep. Winter follows autumn, follows summer, follows spring. Everywhere you look, rhythms are playing out at different speeds across different timelines, but always ticking away with reliable reassurance, perhaps best demonstrated by the tick-tock of time itself passing by. We use the phrase keeping time when we talk about rhythms, and that's why. And then, of course, there's rhythm in music. From sleepy, chilled-out, laid-back grooves to relentless, energy-laden drum and bass, a sense of tempo and rhythm provides the structure and framework for our tracks, keeping the melodies and harmonies we reach for tied to something temporal that we can latch onto, so that one part of our track makes sense as it moves on, moment to moment. Rhythm is a combination of different events happening at once, combining to provide a pattern which repeats, often with only subtle variation. Let's take a basic programmed drum pattern, which might feature a kick drum on beats 1, 2, 3 and 4, with a backbeat snare or clap on beats 2 and 4. Add a hi-hat pattern playing eighth notes, and we've got 3 different kit elements, all playing a contrasting pattern of notes, and yet together they produce something which provides structure and foundation, and which we can build other musical elements on top of. Despite the different rhythms for each drum voice, the beat sounds as one. Using this core rhythmic framework, we could develop this basic pattern in a number of ways. We could add more kick drums to produce a busier bottom end, or ghost notes in the snare drum to produce quieter, skipping hits between the main backbeat ones. Or we could vary the rhythm of the hi-hats to add some 16th note urgency in a couple of places, for example. Crucially, we could also subtly change the position of notes, so that some are a fraction early, whilst others slightly hold back a touch. And suddenly, we're moving from talking about rhythm into something nearer what we could refer to as groove. If rhythm is the marking of where notes might appear on a grid or in a musical score, groove is the personal feel of a rhythmic performance, where the personality of the player is a key part of how that rhythm is played. Some drummers have a deliberately lazy feel, managing to keep to the tempo of a track whilst playing with a carefree, laid-back attitude. Other drummers play with urgency, straining at the confines of the tempo, restlessly playing as though they want to push things faster and faster. So exactly where notes fall within a rhythmic pattern is important. And as our ears are so attuned to musical subtlety, we catch these tiny rhythmic variations and respond to them, feeling urgency or relaxation, together with the drummer. At the core of any rhythm is the overarching time signature of the track you're working on. Most pop and dance music is in 4/4 time, which means 4 quarter or crotchet note beats per bar. Time signatures are always made of 2 numbers, one on top of another, with the lower number defining the type of beat a track is using, and the top number telling you how many of those beats are in a bar. So 12/8 time features 12 eighth notes per bar, and 3/4 time has 3 quarter notes. The feel of your track will change hugely depending on which time signature you use. Remember, any beat can be split into subdivisions, so 4/4 time can use 4 quarter notes per bar, but each of those quarter note beats can be split up into 8th notes, 16th notes, or even 32th notes if you like. But once you've used 8 8th notes, or 16 16th notes, you're into the next bar. This is actually a useful place to begin an appreciation of time signature and rhythm within a single bar. Create a region or use a cycling pattern sequencer and experiment with how rhythms sound as you populate the grid spaces with rhythmic hits. Try out the urgency of 16th notes combined with the groove and feel of other drum voices playing 8th or quarter notes. The variations are endless. There are a number of ways of thinking about rhythm and groove in drum and percussion parts. For starters, you could program MIDI notes directly onto a grid or via a step sequencer for a drum machine-like feel. Alternatively, you could look to bring a more human feel to the same approach, moving notes subtly back and forward to shift groove emphasis. Or you could sample a 1 or 2 bar loop of a track, borrowing the groove of a live player whilst re-triggering this in a regular machine-like way. And then there's live performance, either trusting to your own rhythmic intuition to play notes via pads or a MIDI keyboard and resisting the temptation to quantize them, or by working with a drummer, using mics to capture the essence of their rhythmic personality. And of course, rhythm doesn't just extend to drumming. All instruments employ rhythm as they move from one note to another. We tend to think of melodies, the parts of a song we hum to ourselves, as pitched things, but of course the notes of a tune are equally defined by their rhythm. And when you hear the phrase rhythm section, that doesn't only concern the drummer in a band. The relationship between the drummer and the bass player, and the rhythm guitarist too, is defined by that term, with the foundation of a track forged by the interplay between bass and drums. Rhythms can get complicated too. You might have heard phrases like polyrhythm or syncopation. Polyrhythms are multiple rhythms playing simultaneously. They'll still usually be using the same tempo, but one part of a track might be grooving away in a conventional 4/4 time, whilst another is stressing every third beat instead. That means that every so often the two players will get back in sync, arriving at the same downbeat, but otherwise the two rhythms will play off against one another to throw up something surprising and unconventional. Syncopation is similar in that it accents different and unexpected beats and subbeats within a bar. The dictionary definition of syncopation is a disturbance or interruption of the regular flow of rhythm. Imagine a groove with a conventional backbeat with a snare hit on beats 2 and 4, and then imagine moving that second hit back an 8th note to land between beats 3 and 4, accenting this half beat instead. Suddenly your groove is syncopated. Dub delays, offering dotted 8th note regenerating hits, provide syncopation too, accenting every third 16th note, producing a grooving, out-of-phase rhythm within a more conventional beat structure. And of course, there are so many ways in which rhythms can be added without thinking about conventional instrumentation. You could make your beat loops more sophisticated by bringing in non-musical instruments, or sample machinery and loop sections, pulling out the inherent rhythms to combine these with more conventional drum sounds. Pattern sequence in modular synth rigs, internal arpeggiators in workstations, and hardware synths. Playing and recording any instrument almost always means that there are opportunities for rhythm. And then there are time-based effects, which allow you to bring rhythms to sounds without any obvious groove. Imagine a short synth pluck playing on the downbeat of every bar. Rhythmically, not so interesting. But imagine that same sound with a stereo delay, with a different rhythmical value assigned to the left and right channels. And then imagine that delay being sent to another, so that each echo tap triggers a new, separate rhythm. Soon, from a simple start, rhythmical complexity develops. However you choose to work with rhythm, whether that's working with classic loops like the Amen break, or building beat patterns of your own from scratch, there are infinite ways to be creative and to keep the toes of your audiences tapping and their heads nodding. Groove, it's in the heart.